Hey, we're Matt and Julie Beamer with Jonathan and Elizabeth Beamer, and we are celebrating 30 years of living and ministering overseas. And to do that, we're going to be sharing stories both today, Club 1040 Day, and throughout the year coming. We'll be dropping different stories, different podcasts, and things like that to show you how your investment in Club 1040 is making an impact throughout the Middle East and North Africa, and to talk about how by the year 2030, we want to see that impact expand and continue in a strong and more quick way. So make sure you don't miss out, and also help us out by sharing these with your friends as well. Spread the word, because the more we get this word out, the more we can do, the more quickly we can do it together. God bless.
You know, having Jonathan, I think, made the difference in our time as a missionary. Because when we went over there, we were just, Dad and I.
First 2 years.
First 2 years. But then all of a sudden we had Jonathan. And literally having Jonathan and going around, he caused the English culture, the people, just to come around us. And it's like they accepted us because we had you, and you were born there. I'll never forget the one day we were pushing the pram. We called it the Bentley buggy, and we were pushing you around, and a lady just walked up and would give £1 to the baby. And from that day on, it was just like, it felt like we were accepted because we had you there.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning. I love the story about when we were moving to Manchester. We had Jeff Kaysen with us. He was over with us, and we were getting ready to go into Manchester City Centre to show the next step from Liverpool to Manchester. Do you want to set this up?
Yeah, because we had, some months before Jeff came over and before you were born, we had, the Lord had spoken to us, moved to Manchester, pioneer that church. And so we knew so every time I dropped, that was the airport is in Manchester. Every time I dropped somebody off or picked somebody up on behalf of the ministry, I would drive around and pray and different things and try to get to know the city. I asked people about it, begin fact finding. Well, we thought with Jeff over, he's going to leave pretty soon, I think. And we're like, let's take him over, let's spend the day over there and let's take him over and visit. And as we got close to the city, it was cordoned off and there was police in different places. I'm like, oh, that's strange. I wonder if it's because of the parade from Manchester United won or something like that. And it turned out that the IRA had blew up Manchester City Centre. So, I mean, you guys know, you had mentioned one of our other podcasts that we've lived in 3 different continents now. Mom and I have. We've lived in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. There's been major explosions in all the places we've lived. So Manchester, the IRA bomb, when we moved, the IRA at that point they were blowing up all kinds of stuff at different times, and they blew up the city center of Manchester. And we would have been there at the time it went off, but we just kind of couldn't get ourselves together. I decided to wash the car instead, and it just we putted around, and then eventually we went. Then you guys are a part of the one in Abuja. And maybe it'd be a good point to kind of mention that one. In Abuja, Nigeria, when we were there, the United Nations building was blown up by Boko Haram, that terrorist group. And you guys were in school, and your mom was working in the admissions office there at that time. What was that like?
What do you remember about that day? Do you remember that day at all?
Yeah,
Elizabeth?
I remember everything about that day. I mean, it was a normal school day. We're sat in class every other day. But I think I was in math class or something, and all of a sudden the projector on the screen starts shaking pretty bad for 30 seconds or something. And we're all like, oh, it's an earthquake or something. And then come to find out there had been the explosion. Everything starts shutting down. The cell phone towers, everybody's trying, especially because at the school in Nigeria, it's all expats and government officials and really important people. I mean, the presidents of Nigeria's kids went there at one point too. So everything just instantly shut down, and yeah, lots of security things. It was pretty crazy. How about you? Do you remember anything?
I was in French class.
You still remember
Oui.
Yeah. French class, same thing. You hear a slight boom, then a bunch of shaking, and then, we get sent to the cafeteria area. And, there are specific people, obviously, we weren't the priority, but the people that their parents that worked at the UN building. They were priority. So trying to figure out if their parents were still alive and stuff.
Yeah.
So.
And it's not just that day too, but the ripple effects from that. Like the security for going to our friend's house, going to the local mall, like we can go there. I remember like standing in the class photo that we're taking, and everyone's just like talking about it. Like, oh, we couldn't do this, we couldn't do that because of that. Like the ripple effects, especially with the friends that we had, it was just so security sensitive from then going forward. Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned that about the work, the children, the parents of the children that.
Yeah, I was in the registrar's office, and it was my job, I'll never forget it, is to call each parent of those kids to see if their parents were alive. In, me just trying to call each single person, and whenever you'd finally get them on the phone, you'd hear them, or maybe their driver would come in and said, yes, they're okay. We looked for every single child, and we had to keep them late at night that night in the cafeteria. And because I was helping and was in charge, you guys had to stay.
Yeah.
So you guys got to be part of all of that and feel the terror and the scariness of what that was like. But it was my job to call their parents. And I think only one of them had gotten flown out because airvacked because he was serious. But all the other children, their parents were okay.
Yeah, it was really amazing. I think there were 20 some people that were killed in that. And one of our Bible college students actually worked right in the middle of where that whole, like the center of the explosion is. Someone that had drove in. It's a V-shaped building, and they drove a car with explosives and detonated it right in the middle of that V and blew up the center of it. And their office is like in that V in the center, and they were supposed to be in there at that time, and they're a very conscientious worker. They're there all the time. They work very hard, but they just could not get themselves into work that day, and it was like really a miracle they weren't there. All their colleagues were killed.
And that was someone who had just started Bible school too, right? Had
Yeah.
just been learning about like the inner witness and stuff.
Yes, absolutely. And there were a couple situations like that over the years where the security situations like that, it was a supernatural thing, that people learning how to walk in faith and walk according to the things of the Spirit. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, hearing some of the stories, and letting us pull back the curtain a little bit and invite you into our family adventures over these last 30 years. It's because of you that Clifton 40 has been able to do anything that we've done. Thank you so much.